All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Each week, for a few minutes, we like to take the focus away from the markets and talk about some other topics of the day. And a lot of people are talking about fantasy football right now with everybody's drafts coming up. A lot of our viewers have been talking about it at the Opportunistic Trader. It's a key area of interest right now with football season approaching quickly. And so we're joined by the multi-talented Chris Heller, who's a fantasy football expert. Chris has winnings in excess of $50,000 in high-stakes fantasy football. Chris is starting a new weekly podcast on Instagram TV called Friday Fantasy 5. Chris, thanks for joining us. How's it going?
It's going well, Mike. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, no, it's a lot of people have been talking about football. We've actually had some Steve Fezzik from pregame.com has been talking about the wagering side and also talking about how trading is similar to betting and different ways of finding an edge. And it's always interesting speaking to specialists in whatever their field is. And everybody's right now focused on fantasy, so it's great to have you on.
Yeah, there's certainly a lot of similarities between gambling, trading, and daily fantasy specifically, but fantasy football season long as a whole for sure. I'm excited to answer some questions for your audience and provide some value here.
Yeah,
so I'm ready. I'm ready to rock with you.
We're always looking for an edge, and so looking at the draft, me and you were speaking before, and we were talking about how the first two rounds, it's a lot of great players, and it's tough to differentiate. You have a lot of injury risk, but for the most part, it's a lot of high-value players. But after that is where the draft gets interesting. And, you kind of take a look at, you sent me a list of some different players that you have ranked higher than the consensus, at the running back position. Christian McCaffrey, Burkhead, Williams, Powell, Giovanni Bernard. What do you like in those guys?
Sure. Let's start at the top with Christian McCaffrey. So I would say if we were talking 2 weeks ago, I would have liked him more than I do now, more than consensus, because he is somebody that has been, skyrocketing up draft boards with his preseason performance. What I like about McCaffrey is last year as a rookie with only 8 carries a game and Jonathan Stewart getting the goal line work, he was still RB 10, 11, 12, depending on your league scoring. So an RB 1 as a rookie with not a full workload. Now, what we're hearing from the coaches, 25 to 30 touches a game, which is absolutely not realistic, but even if it's 20, 15 carries, 5 catches per game, plus goal line work, plus what we've seen in the preseason thus far to match what the coaches are saying, I think we have the potential for a top 5 guy here that you can get mid to end second round, but, in some sharp leagues, possibly end of first, top of second these days.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, you know what? If you can also take us through, so I have up for everybody to see your tiers, and right now I have the running back page up, and it looks like you have tier 1, you've got Le'Veon Bell, you've got Johnson and Gurley, then you got a tier 2, 3, 4. What does that mean in terms of, is that your overall ranking, and where does that have to do with, taking people overall in the draft?
Yeah, so I believe in going into a draft with tiers rather than rankings. I think tiers are way more helpful. So the way that I look at this is if I'm looking at my tiers across positions, as a draft comes along, I know what the room is kind of doing, right? So if I am picking in the back end of the first round, let's say, and I know that tier 3, all 5 of these guys are still available, that means I can probably go wide receiver and let one of them slide to the second round because probably one of them will be there, right? If I'm looking at rankings, I don't know where those cutoffs are. Like for me, after tier 3, there's a big drop off to Devonta Freeman and then even a bigger drop off to tier 5. So it's good to know how many guys are left in a common skill set group of players.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so potentially if there's a lot of tier 7 people, it makes sense to maybe hold off and take the different position that you're basically saying, because you can probably get somebody else in this next round. Exactly. And just so everybody knows, I'll be flipping through right now the running back page up, and I'll be flipping to the wide receiver page. One person I just got to ask over here, tier 9, you have Adrian Peterson. Is that what are you expecting from him this season? And where would you even draft him?
He has risen from the dead, absolutely. Now with the injury to Darius Geis and not so much behind him in Rob Kelly and Samaje Perine, the Redskins went out and gave Peterson a workout, and he looked like, I wouldn't say the old vintage Peterson, but good enough to give him I think he's probably going to win the job for first and second down work. Chris Thompson will obviously be there as the third down pass catching specialist, but Adrian Peterson is absolutely draftable right now, probably up in the ninth, 10th round, depending on your league scoring, of course. But yeah, I expect him to kind of be the early down guy on the Redskins, coming from nowhere 2 weeks ago to a relevant fantasy player on a weekly basis.
Yeah, and he looked good in his first appearance, and the guy's, always been a freak in terms of his strength, so it'll be interesting to watch him. So even if he's getting that much touches, wouldn't he, I would think he'd be potentially better than a tier 9. Why'd you put him so far down?
Well, because I still, he still is older. He's still right off the street. There are two other guys there who did play last year, obviously not that well. And I also happen to love Chris Thompson and think that he's the value there and he's the guy you want in that backfield. I'm more of a drafter of running backs who can catch passes and have room to grow into a larger role rather than first and second down plotting types. I like my guys to be a little more versatile than that. So Adrian Peterson is not someone I want to count on as my RB1 or RB2, somebody startable, but as a backup RB3 or a flex play, I would consider him.
Yeah. So let's move over for right now over to the quarterback position. I brought up the image of the quarterbacks you have going. You make note of the fact that you think that the quarterback is a less important position. Why is that?
So it's not necessarily the importance. It's the way that you go about drafting a quarterback. My take on quarterback is you can always wait on drafting a QB, and then you can wait some more. Now, let me just make a caveat here that I'm not talking about super flex leagues where you can play two quarterbacks or two QB leagues where you can start two quarterbacks. So in traditional common leagues where you can start one QB, there are only 12 starting every week. I look at my draft board or my tiers or anyone's rankings. There are 20 guys that I would feel comfortable that seem playable to me on a week-to-week basis.
Right.
So while other people are wasting, and I'll use quotation marks there, early picks on Rodgers, Brady, Wilson, Cam, Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz, whoever the flavor of the day may be, I'd rather stock up on the running backs and the receivers where I can start 2, 3, even 4 of those at one position, depending on your flex spots in your lineups. And then I'll happily roll with Matt Ryan, Matt Stafford, Kirk Cousins, Phillip Rivers, Mahomes even, guys that I can get as the 15th quarterback off the board.
You know what? Hang on one second. I think that I'm going to adjust something for everybody who's listening or on the Zoom session. I think they can now see what we were just talking about. They could not before. So sorry about that for everybody who's listening on the Zoom session. But now they can see the screen. So that's a valid point there. It looks like the tier 3, tier 4 people, you're basically saying that it's worth just waiting because you can pretty much get one of those tier 3, tier 4 people.
Absolutely. And there's even a case to even take it a step further that you can stream quarterbacks where you pick up one every single week, because there's going to be a lot of QB talent on the waiver wire in most leagues, because the guys who have Rodgers and Brady and the top tier dudes are not looking to replace them, right? They're going to lock them in their lineup and leave them every week. So if you're going to take an Andy Dalton opening week because he's playing the Colts, you can drop him and pick up Joe Flacco the next week because, I don't have the schedule in front of me because he's playing the Saints. It's going to be a shootout. So you can approach it that way as well. But definitely advised to wait on QB.
What about in the wide receiver window? Is there anything that sticks out as value or somebody off the beaten path? I have the wide receiver window up right now for everybody to see.
Yeah, so wide receivers similar to running backs. I think between tiers 3 and 4, there is a slight drop, and then between tiers kind of 5 and beyond, there's another drop. I don't think receiver is as deep as it has been in years past. I think you want to grab as many of the tier 1 through 4 guys as possible. I think that's a strong strategy this year. Like, I like pass catchers. I like starting pass catchers in my flex position. They're just more consistent. Like, you can count on Larry Fitzgeralds of the world and Adam Thielens and Stephon Diggs and these guys getting their 120 targets. They get injured less. There's just more of a
It's amazing. I was looking at Larry Fitzgerald there. That's he's been around for a long time. Still up there in the tier 4.
I mean, and that might be low, honestly. He catches 100 passes every year. He's clearly he's the only main guy in the receiving core on the Cardinals in the passing game. Obviously, David Johnson out of the backfield will get his fair share, but Fitzgerald is first ballot Hall of Famer. He doesn't seem to be falling off even at the age where he should. But if you want somebody who jumps off the screen for me here, who I have much higher than other people, that's Kenny Galladay. And I'm not sure how familiar the audience is with him. He's
Never even heard of him.
Second-year player on Detroit Lions last year as a rookie. Did not play that much, but what I love about him, he's 6'4", 215, so a massive body, clearly a playmaker from the little we saw of him last year, and I think early signs have him having opportunity this year. And half the name of the game in fantasy football is just opportunity and being on the field. So I love the talent.
What was that name again?
Kenny Galladay. I love the talent. The Lions love to throw the ball. I think they, pass to run ratio is one of the highest in the league. And he's going to be on the field in 3 wide receiver sets, which is usually their base package. So Golden Tate, Marvin Jones, and Kenny Galladay. And I just expect him to be a name that, 1 year from now when we're having this conversation, you are not saying who's Kenny Galladay. I think he's going to burst on the scene at some point this year.
And you have him in purple and a tier 7 there.
Right. So, the Crabtree, Watkins, Goodwin crew is probably going around the 7th round. Galladay is probably more of a 11th rounder, depending on how sharp your league is. But I have him up there. I wouldn't take him in the 7th because I know that his average draft position is a little lower. But if I'm going to reach for him, maybe in the 8th, 9th, 10th round, I think he's worth it.
What about Green Bay? Who's Aaron Rodgers throwing the ball to this year? Who's he going to be his main targets?
Yeah, I mean, Devontae Adams is his clear number one. Definitely has potential to lead the league in touchdowns. Obviously, you want a piece of the Aaron Rodgers offense anytime you can. Why I don't have him up with the elite tier is just because he doesn't catch as many passes as the other guys, and touchdowns have a greater variance than receptions, right? You can count on Michael Thomas and Keenan Allen catching their 95 to 110 balls. I can't count on that with Devontae Adams. Plus, Jimmy Graham is now the tight end there, and he is another red zone threat who will maybe take some looks away from Devontae Adams in the red zone.
Well, let's feed that into exactly the next thing. I flipped over to the tight end thing, tight end page that you have, and you have Jimmy Graham as a tier 4. I wasn't sure if you'd bump him up to a tier 3, maybe even a tier 2, based on his size and all of a sudden having an amazing quarterback.
Yeah, so I actually put him by himself purposely because that I will not have Jimmy Graham on my teams this year because most people will have him in tier 2. Like, he is usually the 4th or 5th tight end off the board. So where I have him, he will never fall to me because I like a bunch of guys better. What I don't like about Jimmy Graham is I think he's slowing down massively. He did have 10 touchdowns last year, does have another great quarterback, obviously, and he may score 10 touchdowns again this year. However, I think that's all he's going to do. Like, I think he's going to have a lot of lines that are 2 catches for 22 yards and a touchdown, right? And I don't want that. I want guys that I can count on, like Greg Olsen or Jordan Reed or Delaney Walker, who are going to get me 5 catches for 65 yards on a average week, and then add a touchdown or 2 on the good weeks. So I just want a higher floor than I think Jimmy Graham is going to give me.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to watch because Aaron Rodgers, with a great quarterback like that, great quarterbacks make people so much better. So it'll be fascinating to see. But you might be right. A lot of people are expecting that and taking him earlier. What else sticks out on the tight ends page that's interesting?
So for me, Trey Burton is the name that I have a little bit higher than the masses. I have him right there in tier 2, so the 4th or 5th tight end off the board in my mind. So Burton comes over from the Eagles to the Bears, and in addition coming over is Matt Nagy from the Chiefs. So the offense that the Bears are now going to be running is going to be similar to what the Chiefs did last year, Burton playing in the Travis Kelce role. Obviously, there's a lot of coach speak in the beginning of the year and in training camp, but all signs in the preseason games and preseason practice shows and leads to the conclusion, at least in my eyes, that Burton is the real deal, and Nagy plans to move him around the formation and get this guy the ball. And we've seen in the past that when Ertz was hurt last year and Burton had that feature role, he almost always performed. So I'm willing to reach on him a little bit as my tight end 1.
Interesting. And David Njoku has had a good preseason at Cleveland. You have him in tier 5.
Yeah, I like Njoku. I think he can definitely that tier 5 is kind of where the cutoff is, right? I think if you have one of those in the first top five tiers starting for you, you can be all right. Ending with George Kittle, who's a second-year player in San Fran, who I actually like as a little bit of a sleeper as well. As you get lower down to tier 6, tier 7, it's more of a dart throw kind of platooning, maybe streaming week to week.
So, which segment, running back, wide receiver, tight ends, quarterback, do you think there's the biggest fall off if you miss like the top three people or so that, you need to, there's going to be a huge fall off if all of a sudden you end up with a tier 6 sort of guy?
I think every year it's probably running back because there's only one guy per team usually, maybe two that are getting the stats each year for us fantasy fanatics. So like I said before, after that top 10, 11, I think there's a pretty big drop. So if you can get one of those guys in the top 3 or 4 tiers going down to Devonta Freeman, that's where you start to guarantee 300 touches. I think if you go to tier 5, you can get that as well with some of those guys. Alex Collins, Lamar Miller, Jordan Howard seem to have roles pretty intact. However, that tier 5 group, let's leave Rex Burkhead to the side for a minute because he's a unique character there. The others are not going to catch passes, which is, like I said before, the reason that the top 10 are higher and where they are is because all those guys seem to be 3 down, bell cow backs that are going to run the ball early and catch the ball on 3rd down and kind of always be on the field.
Yeah, and on that, what sort of do you believe in the strategy? Like, do you want to take people's backups, or is it better to just get them once the guy gets injured?
You're saying handcuffing running backs?
Well, no, like even like okay, if you take Le'Veon Bell, or do you want to take Pittsburgh's number 2 running back also, just in case you've invested so highly in Le'Veon in Pittsburgh that if Le'Veon goes down?
Right. So that is handcuffing. That's the term. So no, I do not believe in that. I think it's a waste of a roster spot. I would rather take if I have Le'Veon Bell, I would rather take David Johnson's backup. So I have the chance. I'm more of an upside type of drafter. Like if things break right, I want to dominate everyone. So I'd rather have not play it safe and take the insurance on Le'Veon Bell. I'd rather shoot for the stars and David Johnson goes down, then I have his backup and I have 2 studs right there.
Gotcha. What about, every single year after like week 7, even potentially earlier, but especially in the later part of the season, there's some guys that you don't even draft or that are drafted really late that end up being full-time starters. Are there any sort of names on the radar, especially at the running back position, that you think that could be the case for?
Yeah, so usually rookies become those guys, right? Because they take a little bit of getting used to. They're not great in pass protection, so coaches are a little hesitant to put them on the field. Some teams are out of it by the second half of the season, so they want to see what they have. So a couple guys who fit that mold. One I would say is Kerryon Johnson in Detroit. He is a rookie from Auburn who will be in the rotation day 1. However, it's with LeGarrette Blount and Theo Riddick, who happen to be goal line and pass catching specialists respectively. Those are 2 things that you want to get out of your running back: scoring the ball, catching the ball. Kerryon Johnson might not be in a position to do that. That being said, if the second half of the year rolls around, he can, talent rises to the top, and they might want to see what they have and give him more and more touches as the year progresses. Aaron Jones would be another one. So last year, he was a rookie on Green Bay, and his talent running the ball kind of leaps off the screen, at least as passes the eye test for me. He has Jamal Williams and Ty Montgomery there with him in the backfield, but in terms of talent winning out, he suspended the first 2 games, so Jamal Williams has a chance to take the Packers lead and kind of run with it. But if you believe the talent wins out, if you believe that the running back position is fragile and Jamal Williams might not stay healthy the whole year, I think Aaron Jones is someone in the back half of the year who could really emerge as the go-to guy in an Aaron Rodgers-led offense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first off, I also want to say before I ask the next question, if anybody else has any questions, especially also from the Zoom area, ask and I'll ask Chris for you. But in general, what are some high-level tips you want to tell people kind of going into their drafts? Like what's a good strategy?
Well, first is it depends on the scoring system, right? And I always tell people, and somewhat in jest, the first rule is to know your rules, because you wouldn't believe how many conversations I have where I ask, is your league PPR? How many flex spots are there? And the answer is, I don't know, I have to check, right? So you have to know what you're drafting before you go into your draft, because that would change my answer on what your strategy should be.
Right.
But some things that should work for everyone, wait on quarterback, like we talked about earlier. Don't sweat the early picks. Like I said, like you said on the intro, I think the first 2 rounds, the top 23 guys or so, so through my first 4 tiers on the running back page and through my first 3 tiers on the wide receiver page, you take any two of those guys plus a Gronk, add him to the list, so it's 24, Kelsey, 25 guys. That should get you through the first 2 rounds. You pair any two of those guys together, you have a good foundation and can kind of build around that. Beyond that, I think it more comes down to scoring. What I would say is if you're in a PPR league, point per reception, which I think most leagues have shifted to these days, you really want to load up on the wide receivers. You want guys who catch balls, and if you have flex spots, I like to personally fill my flex spots with wide receivers almost exclusively.
Yeah, especially in this PPR world.
Yes.
I'm getting one question from RR Poker. He's saying a South Florida homer question. Any Dolphins you like worth drafting? It's funny. I just had a small draft with my family with a lot of kids, and it's crazy. I'm a Dolphin fan. I grew up in Miami. We didn't take a Dolphin. Kenny and Drake went a little. He's a running back. Starting running backs go. But other than that, I mean, there's never any Dolphins. It's crazy. Can't get any wide receiver talent and any top picks.
So yes, I will. I will make you and our friend from South Florida happy and say Kenny Stills, I think, is incredible value. I think Devontae Parker has the pedigree, but the old Maya Angelou quote: "When somebody shows you who they are, believe them." I'm not buying into Devontae Parker hype for the fourth, fifth year in a row as the number one wide receiver on Miami. Kenny Stills is a quality football player. He's the number one wide receiver on Miami. And there were a ton of targets vacated by Jarvis Landry now being on the Browns. So I don't know why Kenny Stills has not moved up from his 11th, 12th round average draft position. I think he's the wide receiver one on a team that's not going to be good. So they're going to be behind, and game flow will dictate a lot of passes, right? They're not going to be able to run the ball and grind out the clock. So I love Kenny Stills as a value late.
Yeah, hopefully, but exactly what you even just said, grinding out. We've been losing for years and years, and somehow our wide receivers get no traction. And I agree with you. Unfortunately, Devontae Parker should be good, but we'll wait and see. On that note, you mentioned Jarvis Landry. He's got a new home in Cleveland. You have him in the tier 4. That seems pretty low for a guy who has consistently put up 100 receptions and had great production. What are your thoughts in Cleveland?
I actually like Jarvis Landry a lot. He could certainly play for me this year. Receivers changing teams are always a bit questionable. New offense, new quarterback relationship. So that, I guess, dings him a little. But in terms of where he's being drafted, I actually like him a little bit more than consensus right now. And a lot of things with Landry, he's always a pass catcher, but his knock was he doesn't – he averages a few yards per catch because he's like basically an extension of the running game. At least he was in Miami, and doesn't score that many touchdowns. But I'm a fan. I mean, Landry can certainly play for me. I think where I have him right here with Amari Cooper and Chris Hogan and Larry Fitzgerald, I think probably consensus would have him a tier or two below that.
Interesting. And what about anybody super deep sleepers? Kind of we were alluding to it before, but guys taking in the last 3 or 4 or 5 rounds that at the end of the season might be big production guys. Are there a few of those?
There are always a few. It's hard to even have sleepers these days because there's so many content outlets out there providing their sleeper lists. So kind of sleepers, everyone knows everyone else's sleepers. But I see you have the tight end page up, so I will pull one from there. Ricky Seals-Jones, the tight end of the Arizona Cardinals. Like I said before, talking about Fitzgerald and David Johnson, there's not much else there to throw to. I don't think they're going to be a great team. They're going to have to throw. He could theoretically be the second or third option in the passing game. And Sam Bradford, who's going to start at QB there, is quite accurate. They might move over to Josh Rosen, the rookie, at some point throughout the year. But I like Seals-Jones as a guy who might even go undrafted, somebody who can be a weekly producer at the tight end position.
Yeah.
If you want to move to another position, I will gladly do that.
What about wide receiver? Because like you said, I think especially in points per reception leagues, some of these guys end up being huge production guys at the end of the season.
So in a deep wide receiver that I like is Geronimo Allison. He is the second wide out on the Green Bay Packers. Now, he's not second in the pecking order because Randall Cobb in the slot will be the second guy. But to sum that up pretty succinctly, Geronimo Allison will be on the field with Aaron Rodgers 80% of the offensive snaps. So you can get a guy like that in the 15th round. Like it's just a way to cheaply buy into Aaron Rodgers' production.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't see him on. Oh, there he is in tier 9. Is that it?
He's in tier 9, yes, which is pretty high, higher than the consensus, I would say, at this point in time. He does have some young physical specimen type rookies nipping at his heels for that slot, but right now it's his, and Aaron Rodgers seems to trust him. So I like him as a deep flyer. For running back, if I want to go completely off the board, somebody who no one is even thinking or talking about, I'll give you one here, and this would be, this would put me on the map if this thing comes true, but Robert Turbin, suspended for 4 games, Indianapolis Colts. That backfield seems to be a mess. So I think there's a shot, a greater than 0 chance that Robert Turbin comes back week 5 from suspension and takes that job and runs with it. And I think that offense is going to put up a lot of points this year with Luck back healthy. I think they're not going to be a great team. They're going to have to score. And I think Turbin has an outside shot at being a consistent running back too, and kind of pushing the young guys, Marlon Mack and Naheem Hines and Jordan Wilkins, to the side.
That's interesting for the opportunistic traders out there. Turbin, very, very late, could be the starter week 5, 6, 7, and then in the playoffs when you really need him.
He's a penny stock.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Hey, well, that was Chris Heller giving us a lot of good information on the fantasy football world. Definitely. So Chris has a new podcast starting on Instagram TV, Friday Fantasy 5, and he's going to be going over, I guess, every Friday his different fantasy starts and things of that nature. And so we'll definitely keep that updated and hear from Chris more as the season progresses. Thanks for joining us, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Mike. Hope I was able to help everyone, and everyone listening, good luck in your drafts. If you have any questions, find me.
Definitely. Where can they find you if they want to submit some questions?
They can email me directly, chris@chrisheller.me. My Instagram handle is chrisheller.me. If you want to see the Instagram TV show that will be starting next Friday, follow me there, or Twitter, cheller32.
Perfect. All right. I think we will have some follow-up fantasy questions. Thanks, Chris. We'll talk to you soon.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Have a good one.
All right.